It's all about creative risk.
There's success in sequels.
It's about a bankruptcy of ideas.
It's a business.
It's become self-destructive.
It's still about ideas.
Excuse-moi.
Peter Bart gives heart attacks.
Goober is aggressive.
Whoa!
Loquacious.
Hold on.
Overwhelming.
Give me a break.
Wrong, wrong, wrong. On today's Sunday morning shootout, is the DVD boom here to stay? Are studios letting their $200 million tentpoles get out of control? And we'll shoot it out with Harvey Weinstein, co-chairman and co-founder of Miramax.
I'm Peter Bart.
And no, you're Peter Goober, and I'm Peter Bart, and this is Shootout.
Okay.
Okay. So, Pete, 25 years ago, you used to be nattering at me about video, the future of video. Now, I used to keep telling you, please, shut up, switch subjects. Don't be such a futurist. Would you ever imagine that we'd reach a time as the present where people would spend billions a year on something called the DVD? I mean, it's an astonishing phenomenon, and is, of course, as you and I know, the underpinning of the success of the movie industry today. The interesting phenomenon about the DVD is, will it last? Will all those young guys out there continue to buy Fast and Furious on DVD for their libraries? Will any other part of that business keep expanding at this rate? What do you think?
Well, you won't last, I won't last, and it won't last. The question of how long it will last. DVD is not the end. It's not even the end of the beginning. It's the beginning of the beginning. Right after the DVD comes this little memory stick. It holds a complete movie on this memory stick. It can play it on a cell phone with a video screen. It can play it on a large plasma screen, any device. The whole movie's there. And this little device holds 80 movies, 80 films.
What is this, product placement?
No, it is product awareness. So if you think the DVD is the end, get a look at this. You don't have to have DVDs. And soon, VOD and near video on demand and broadband. What if you could have on demand the film you wanted to see when you wanted to see it? That's where we're moving to.
Wow.
The real thing is downloading the experience. And that's what's going to happen.
I don't think so. I mean, at the moment, the real thing is that there are millions of people around the world who, for the first time, are building up a library of film that gives them tactile pleasure. They actually can see these things. They can pull something out. Now, their taste is strange. I mean, was it the Haunted Mansion is one of the hottest selling DVDs at the moment. The Big Fish was a hot selling. I mean, there are all kinds of pictures
Are you saying
that don't.
They're getting movies for tactile pleasure? They're renting and getting movies for tactile pleasure?
Just because you get your tactile
hold my
pleasures
hand, hold my hand. I'll give you some tactile pleasure.
No, that's too tactile.
Okay. The reality is this. It's the experience that is important. And if you can eliminate all the plastic, from the experience and just give the audience the experience, it's much more efficient for the distributor, financier, the artist, and the audience.
I think people like to have things that they can see on a shelf. At the moment, that's a pleasant and delicious habit.
You're
and I
still
hope it
working with a
continues.
pen. You don't use a word processor.
Or when you were nattering at me about the future of video, you were A, correct and ahead of your time, and B, also about 20 years ahead of reality. And I think that still pervades your personality today.
You know, the tipping point...
So congratulations.
No. Congratulate me. That's false pride and false ego. Here's what you really have to congratulate me for being able to raise the issue that everything ends. You, me, and it. The question is when and how and what follows it. And the more efficient that mechanism, the more likely it'll prevail.
I'll let you get away with that.
Okay. So let's get back to the films. What is the big gorilla that's sitting in the room today on issues and films?
Well, there are lots of gorillas sitting, and they're known as the tentpole pictures. You know, we're still in the very early days of tentpoles, which I think you'd have to define as 200 million plus pictures, including marketing as well as production costs. But there are already signs that this early iteration of the tentpoles, that they're out of control. There are lots of areas where the danger, and you and I have talked about this, that danger of a $200 million picture opening and absolutely imploding. There are little portents that the studios are dancing around the edges of this potential chasm. Do you think that's true?
You know, Peter, there's a tremendous seduction for studio executives to these pictures, and they need them on their schedule. And when you get a big, giant hit, a giant mega hit from a tentpole picture, man, ka-ching, 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 and that is absolutely seductive to every other studio. And I think you see it, whether it's Shrek or it's Finding Nemo. You see all kinds of films that create enormous, not only revenue, but enormous value to the whole mechanism of that studio. They define themselves by these tentpole pictures. It does something else for them, too. It beats everybody else out of the marketplace. It takes the independents. They can't compete with $200 million pictures. So it keeps the marketplace and those weekends for themselves.
But here's what I would posit to you, Pete. Are there enough accessible, exploitable subjects to give, let's say, Warner's wants to make 5 tentpole pictures a year. Are there enough extraordinary subjects like Harry Potter out there that can lend itself to 5 a year? Or will they start straining a bit with this business plan and all of a sudden they're going to try sticking subjects that are rather flimsy and that are going to capsize?
The answer is yes, but that doesn't make your argument, because failure is an inevitable cul-de-sac on the road to success. There will be failures in that area. There will be failures in that area, but they can survive these failures. Disney can survive with 1 or 2 failures. It's such a big company. The idea is they have to be in that business. In your paper, you see all these tentpole pictures being advertised.
We don't label them as tentpoles.
Yes, you do.
No, we don't. We don't label something as a tentpole, but in point of fact, there are certain general criteria. I think a studio person would say, no, it has to be clearly exploitable. It has to lend itself to merchandising and to all sorts of other ancillary values, and has to play big overseas.
So cost doesn't make it a tentpole?
It doesn't, but let's put it this way. Once the costs head north of 100, you better start heading toward tentpoledom.
Okay, but just because it costs a lot of money doesn't mean it's an anathema to the studio. You know, back when I started in the business, M&Ms were a nickel. Now they're $1.25 at the airport. And
how do you know that? Do you buy M&Ms at the
yeah,
airport?
all the time. I fly commercial.
I think that's sweet.
So one of the questions you ask yourself, is it a function that the studios can effectively deliver? And I think the answer is yes. If you look over the worldwide grosses, box office grosses, and the ancillary values of DVDs, rentals, and television, network, and cable, they are incredibly valuable assets in these studios that will have to continue to make them.
True.
Times have changed, Bart, and so should you.
Thanks, Pete.
Okay.
So, Pete, it's time for our guest, Harvey Weinstein.
You know, you say master and commander, you think of Harvey Weinstein. He's really been a lightning rod both for new filmmakers and great films, and also for the drama behind the camera.
And he's reinvented the Academy Award process.
Why don't we bring him on in?
Yeah.
Harvey, why don't you come on over and join us?
Hey, Peter. How are you? See you. Hi, Peter.
Good.
Hi, Peter. Nice to see you.
So Fahrenheit 9/11.
Got to start with the easy ones.
Michael Moore walks into your office sometime in the past and pitches you this project. What went through your mind?
Well,
Did he pitch it, actually, or did he present
well,
it?
he told me about it, and I'd done a movie with Michael called The Big One,
Right.
which was his kind of follow-up to Roger and me. We had a great relationship. You know, amazingly enough, what really aggravated me about the current political situation was I kind of believed that there were weapons of mass destruction. I was kind of supporting it. And as I began to read more and more about the deception, you know, and the proposed deception, I just thought maybe we should have Michael look into this. And that's what he wanted to do, and it really appealed to me. And of course, as time went on, you know, Richard Clarke's book, Bob Woodward's book, you know, Craig Unger's book, I mean, Vanity Fair with Graydon, I mean, you know, doing piece after piece on it. I just said, you know, I think it's a patriotic act, not a political act. And I was glad the New York Times said the same thing.
But did you foresee the firestorm inside the international conglomerate you're a part of?
Honestly, no.
Right.
I mean, no, I did not.
Well, Michael, of course, the way he explains it, Disney did not say a year ago that they would not, that Miramax should not release this picture. That it wasn't until the screening for the young executive at Disney that comment was made. I mean, is that generally the version you understand?
Disney definitely registered, you know, the idea that they didn't want to be in business with Michael and they didn't want to be in business with this project a year ago. However, I mean, we also registered that we wanted to be in business. So there were a lot of letter writings and a lot of saber rattling, I mean, beforehand. It was just on both sides. What I had hoped, you know, and I'm sure they hoped the same thing, was that once I saw the movie, I thought, well, you know what, we could, you know, work this peacefully, you know what I mean, and amicably out with each other. Because the movie is, you know, Craig Unger's book, Woodward's book, Richard Clarke's book. It's, you know, I mean, it's how it's put together, but a lot of the things have come out already. So I thought that might be an invitation to find an amicable solution. But I'm very happy that they let us have the movie, and they've been very good about that.
Were you surprised by the astonishing reaction in Cannes? I mean, that was acclamation. That was you weren't there, Pete, but I mean, it was an ovation of the sort that I just don't remember.
Yeah, but not being there and being here, there was a feeling that maybe this was a French anti-American vote.
Yeah, but it wasn't. I didn't feel that way.
I think there were a lot of Americans in the room, Peter, and I've been in Cannes for Cinema Paradis, so I've been lucky enough to win 5 Palme d'Ors. This was the 6th, and I've seen some reactions in my day, but nothing like this. This was 25 minutes standing in the room, and then I never saw this ever, where he walked out and they wouldn't let him out the doors, and that was another 10 minutes of just the audience surrounded him, and I just think that it was an electrifying moment. You can always tell. There was a great line Jimmy Breslin said in How the Good Guys Finally Won about ending the Vietnam War. He said, when Dominic Palumbo is against the war from the iron workers, that's how the war ends.
Right.
I saw 2 friends of mine. I mean, it's amazing how you all always have different experiences. I'm watching this movie, all the French intelligentsia, the intellectuals. Quentin's there with the jury, Tilda Swinton, Emmanuel Bayard, who's not bad on the eyes. And there, out of the corner of my eye, I see 2 friends of mine that I got tickets to. These are 2 guys who go to every pub in London. They're like night crawlers. Right. And they turn to me to wave, and they're crying. And it's that exact moment, it's that personal moment that I knew that this was something way beyond political, way beyond anything. These 2 guys have about as much social conscience as a moth, and they were just so moved by the film. And when that happens, that's why I think it's going to be important.
What's your suspicion as to what it might do in the U.S. in terms of business?
I'm the worst predictor in the world. When I did Sex, Lies, and when Bob and I had to sit in a room with Sex, Lies, and Videotape, and we had to make that first bid that changed the course of our business, I said 6. And if I would have thought that it would have grossed $6 million, we probably never would have bought it. Yeah. Luckily, Bob said 17, and then went on to do 24. Yeah. So his optimism and my lack of knowledge almost sank us at the beginning stages. So don't put a number with me.
This is a picture where the gross will impact upon other events. I mean, this is one of those few pictures, I can't remember any, Pete, where I think votes will be swayed by this picture. So if it's a $75 million picture, I think it becomes an important social force.
Lawrence Bender said to me, 3rd week into the campaign, you should say, bring it undecided. But I mean, I think it's not, I'm just hoping that people see it and make their own decision. And look at it as, a movie that's funny, smart, entertaining, scary, and emotional.
When you picked it up initially and had that first meeting with Michael, had you known that Mel Gibson had agreed to, or his company had agreed to fund it and then backed out?
Yeah, because that's why I got it. In other words, Mel had made a deal. I had tried. We lost. Mel won. And then they called me and said, Mel's out. And now, we didn't, we gave Michael total freedom, to make his movie. But I got to tell you something about Mel, and I guess we're talking now tonight. There's a screening, in Los Angeles. Mel Gibson, I called him, and I said, why don't you come? And that's the kind of guy that Mel Gibson is. I might disagree with him on the passion, and we have two totally diametrical views of that movie. But, on a courage, guts, level, I admire him. And I'll tell you something else. When the big, fight over the movie, whether it's going to get out, whether it's not going to get out, the unlikeliest of allies happen. Roger Ailes at Fox, when he sees this movie, I don't want to be responsible for his cardiac bills, but on a First Amendment issue, it blew his mind. Yeah. So the best coverage we had wasn't ABC, CBS, or NBC, and even Michael Moore couldn't believe it. There was Fox News. Roger Ailes said a movie being, in his mind that couldn't be distributed or having a, fight for distribution just was un-American. He'd rather say, bring it on, we'll deal with that, but you have a right to show it.
But this movie was always this subject matter is always made for you. I don't mean the subject matter of the film, I mean the behind-the-scenes drama. You always seem to find another way that gets involved with the firestorm of a film, that it's controversy or it's subject matter that's unique to yourself, and then you champion it. In this film, here, did you see all that at all when you were listening to the first pitch from him?
Well, the first pitch was, I mean, he told me this incredible story that I didn't know, which was that on September 13th, 2 days after, 9/11, that the Bin Laden family was flown out of America.
Right.
I mean, this is a year ago. I mean, they were talking more than a year ago, and he tells me that. I said, "Come on, Michael, you're BSing us, And then he shows me this documentation, these interviews that he had, and proved it to us, and that stunned me. And originally, I think the movie was going to go more in that direction. As events evolved, as Clark spoke, as other people spoke, Terry Fremo and Khan said, this is the cinema of now, this movie. Yeah, right. So right up until the end, the movie's been edited. I mean, we were editing it yesterday, 2 days ago for tonight's screening, and the one thing that changed was the count of American soldiers killed in Iraq, because it went up. And a week from now it'll be more, but the movie's locked. So
well, we should lock the deaths. That'd be nice too.
That would be I'm sure we could do
Miramax, in a way, is the theater of now. There's always a dramatic event that seems to be embroiling you. The relationship with Disney, what is going to happen there?
Or can you put Humpty Dumpty back together again?
I'm sure, knowing Disney and Miramax and, the two amicable sorts that we are, Michael and I will just come, and probably sing like a happy song together, and, it'll all end up peacefully like one of those animated movies.
Right. Exactly.
Right? I hope it's not Bambi where somebody gets killed.
Oscar time. Now, you were the ultimate in good citizenship this time, after taking the heat for alleged infractions of arcane rules.
Yes.
What effect do you think the shorter season had, number one? And number two, did behavior really change as a result of all these new rules and restrictions?
I found that I was so good that I wasn't doing anything wrong, and it was really getting everybody aggravated, especially the press, because I gave them nothing to write about. I just said, okay. And then when
you were the poster boy for bad behavior.
I was the poster boy for bad behavior, and then when I was the poster boy for good behavior, all of a sudden columns were drying up. Right. Manohla Dargis, the critic in the Los Angeles Times, wrote a full column saying, I'm missing Harvey this year. For what? So, but what I found out was all the infractions took place, and I would call somebody and say, hey, that company. They said, they're faceless, they're nameless. It's not the same thing. If you do it, it's a big story. They do it, who cares?
But speaking of the moth drawn to the flame, though, but about the moth drawn, using a metaphor before,
right.
It seems that you are drawn to the flame of the Academy Awards, that somehow you look at a picture early on and say, this is an Academy picture, and that somehow attracts your inner self more than even the economics.
It is the economics. I wish I could say it was the ego. When you start out as an independent and you don't have a studio, I've been on both sides of it now. I know what the luxury is to turn around and say, all right, let's have $50 million P&A spend. We only do that once a year around Oscar time. But the idea of a $50 million P&A spend, we're going to take billboards, we're going to do this, the world, I'm going to market the movie. The way I started out with movies like My Left Foot, we made the movie for $3 million. This was the first Oscar campaign. And the reason we innovated on the cassettes was, we're sitting there with no money, no budget, no anything, and we say, wow, if the movie gets a Best Picture nomination, we're going to do a lot of gross on this. So we use the Oscars as a marketing platform. This is in the really independent days of the company before we were bought, by Disney. So we had no money. The total capitalization of Miramax was a $25 million loan. It was a loan. So how do we take a $3 million movie? That's not even the P&A campaign for anything. So that's what we were faced with. And each time, the crying game, My Left Foot.
But has that invention been replaced in the business generally by just throwing money at ads in these magazines called Variety and Hollywood Reporter?
Well, I find the trades to be super effective. Right. I find, the New York Times and the LA Times to be less effective because you're really dealing with a targeted audience. Right. And, when I see those double truck, triple truck New York Times ads, I go, God, you get it, we're really dealing with a universe of 6,000 people. This is for somebody's directing ego, or I'm going to please my, and then of course this is a peer pressure place. Your director goes, well, he had a triple page truck ad, and you say, but wait a second, I can spend, I can spend a ninth of that in Variety and get the same audience and be more effective. He said, I don't care, I want it in the New York Times. My aunt reads the New York Times. I said, but I'll send her Variety. He said, no, she reads the New York Times.
So the other side of the coin, there's this character called Bob Weinstein, who has this habit of making franchise movies. It's rather interesting. Now, how does that process work? Do you see his movies as well, the Scary Movie 3 and 4, and talk with him about the marketing and the cuts and all that?
No, he showed me a rough cut of a movie called The Crow. And I said, this is unreleasable. It's the most violent thing I've ever seen in my life. My sensibilities are offended. He was
on the right track then.
I did on the right, this is the first Crow. His first movie. At Dimension. How'd you like to start out with that as your first movie in Dimension? That's how hot he has been. Right. And so the minute they said that, they said, all right, just bring him in as a guinea pig. So the next time they showed me a movie in advance was Scream, and I started jumping up and down on my seat, and they would just time the scares to me, and I just saw Curse, the new Wes Craven movie. So I'm just a guinea pig. I'll tell you from a Disney point of view, the one thing is Bob's rate of return, and running a company, is 35 to 40% rate of return on movies. If I was Disney, maybe you'd get rid of me. But I would, if they should build a statue in Burbank to Bob. He never misses. He doesn't spend any money. He only makes 5 movies. He has the greatest track record in the world. You could put his record against Spielberg. There's no, I read like Amy Pascal had 5 hit movies in a row. My God, what does my brother have? 40 hit movies in a row? It's an insane, and they're all franchise movies.
And they're not gigantically expensive. They're not $200 million movies.
$40 million movies.
So what do you think accounts for all this drama? Those facts are, if they're irrefutable.
I probably account for the drama.
Right.
I think it's Fahrenheit 9/11. Right. It's my personality.
Right.
We should probably retire me somewhere, and let Bob, just do it. Make oodles of money, and they can all just make oodles of money somewhere.
So now the studios,
I'd still be fighting like Paul Muni in The Last Angry Man.
The studios really are banking on the big tent poles, these pictures that cost 150 to. Do you think that is really long-term a smart business plan for the movie industry?
Well, you have to. I developed a movie. It was called Lord of the Rings. Yeah. I'm still smarting from the fact that. We didn't get a chance to do it, but we were gross players on that. And by the way, Disney's piece of the gross on Lord of the Rings will pay for what they spent for my entire company. You never read that in the newspaper.
Of course not.
But the entire price of the company on one deal, will be Disney. They're reimbursed on one movie. So when you look at a Lord of the Rings and say, when a book has a piece of, like that, or Narnia, which Disney is doing, or Harry Potter. I think right now we're living in that kind of world where I own a project, Artemis Fowl, Bartimaeus. These projects, kids read them, they grow up. New generations read these books. I think that this is a great, I don't know if you want to do the one-off, but but you certainly want to build the franchise.
Yeah. I think that's the argument we had before, that the business has changed so greatly. These big summer Christmas pictures and these pictures that work for kids. It's a seduction for a company to build that franchise. If you have Harry Potter 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, you can just rest, take a breath for a couple of years, and rather than starting over each time. So I think he's really right, and I think that's the center of gravity of the issue. These companies need some of those big pictures to sustain themselves.
You make them. I don't know what the economics will be on Van Helsing, but that's the that's the one that doesn't work. Unless it becomes a franchise. But the same director got Mummy 1 and 2. Yeah, so that's a good bet.
But you'll get killed in Van Helsing, all said and done.
They're not going to get killed.
No, I don't think so at all.
No, they'll get out.
Right.
Are you still having fun at it?
I love what I do. I love it. I love the books. I love the movies. I love the music. I love the whole, political center. You
like the attacks?
The attacks on the company?
No, and you, and with the Biskins and the Esterhouses and all these guys,
At first, I was incredibly sensitive, to all of it. And as time goes by and you get older, you just start to say, okay, enough already, And I think you understand the agenda. And running a publishing company, I deal with writers all day long. And let me tell you, and this goes for Peter Bart too. They just love to stir it up. They're born with a genetic situation. Peter, you and I, we want to settle everything. We want to do it behind the scenes. But you deal with writers. It's like, they just say, okay. We have a guy who, is writing a book about Smarty Jones. The horse. It started out heroic on Friday, and now he wants to find out what happened to that race? You know, and I'm going, oh my God, wait a second, what happened to the hero pitch? You know, so I mean, I think, you know.
Harvey, it's been great to talk to you. We really
Peter,
thank you for coming by.
It's a pleasure.
It's
Peter,
our pleasure.
it's a pleasure.
Always.
Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
You guys are great,
Thanks.
truly.
Yes.